All right, guys, welcome back. This is episode 40 of the MGM MarketAbilities podcast. We have a special guest with us today, Ryan Patrick.
Hi.
We just had Ryan on the show. He actually took over for Angie. And if you notice, Angie's not even in the room. We kicked her out.
Yeah.
We're done with her. I'm just kidding. We're not done with her. She'll be back eventually. We'll see. But we got Ryan on the podcast today because Ryan has started an incredible niche down podcast. Mm-hmm. And so, today we just kind of want to talk about, if you want to start a podcast or if you want to use a podcast for your business or maybe just for fun. Because I mean, like Rob, you guys all know Rob. He used to have a podcast where they would just joke around for like an hour, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think what'd they call it?
I think it was like just nonsense or plain nonsense.
Just plain nonsense was the podcast.
Yeah.
Appropriate.
Yeah. And so you can pretty much do anything with that, right? It's like a podcast can be anything you want it to be. I mean, I've listened to horror film podcasts or business podcasts or marketing podcasts like these, right? And it's like you can go on any topic. It doesn't matter, right?
So let's get into like deciding what to talk about, because that I think can make or break a podcast if it's something that is relevant or can gather an audience. So for MASH Matters, you picked the legendary show MASH.
Right.
What were the leading factors in you picking that for your podcast?
Well, I've been listening to podcasts for many, many years. And when the great thing about podcasts and podcasting is that if you are interested in a topic, you're probably going to find a podcast on it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you talk about there's some obscure stuff out there, but there are people who like those kinds of things. And so if you're interested in a topic and you go to a podcast player, or if you just go to Google and type in, a knitting podcast, you're going to find podcasts about knitting. I mean, it's just how it is.
As if knitting weren't boring already. And listen to a podcast.
Now, listen, we talked about knitting once on our podcast, and the knitting lobby, the powerful knitting lobby came after us. So you don't
you got attacked?
Don't be dissing the
Dude,
knitters.
They have needles.
Man, and they know how to use them. Okay.
Yeah.
So many years ago, as I was listening to podcasts, MASH has been a show that I've loved my entire life. And I wanted to see if there was a MASH podcast. And there was a MASH podcast out there. And I started listening to it. And the more I listened to it, the more frustrated I became because, no offense if you guys are watching or listening, they weren't very good. It really bothered me. It really bothered me. And so I almost, it got to the point where, as a huge fan of the show, I felt insulted that that my favorite show was not well represented in the podcast space.
You got convicted.
It was. And I had done a short podcast before. My friend Tim Miles and I did a podcast called Funny Business, where we talked about business, So I had a little bit of experience with podcasts, so I knew that I could do it. I just didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do a podcast that I, as a fan, would enjoy listening to, and so there's much backstory to this, but the short story is that I worked in radio for many years, and one of the perks of working in radio is you get connected with some people, and I was able to connect many years ago with a guy named Jeff Maxwell, who was on the show MASH. He played Private Igor Straminsky, who was the poor schlub who slopped the food in the mess tent for 9 seasons of the show, and he and I had stayed in touch over the years. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this and would love to maybe have you as a recurring part, or maybe just have you as an interview or something. I don't know what it's going to be. And he contacted me and said, hey, I'd kind of like to do this with you. And
That's
that
awesome.
was, I'd never in a million years thought that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's incredible.
But it did. And we're 90-something episodes in now. And it's been a heck of a ride. And I think that we have created that show that I, as a fan, wanted to create.
Yeah.
And since then, there have been some other MASH podcasts that have popped up. and some of them are good too. And so
Yeah.
and they focus more on like episode by episode recaps. We are more of an oral history of the show, and so it's different. And it's also the difference is I come at it from the perspective of a super fan. He comes at it from the perspective of somebody who is on the show,
Right.
who lived the show. It was his job,
It's
and so
such a unique perspective from
totally unique, and it works.
Yeah, especially like compared to people who are going through the episodes.
Yes,
because I've seen that like the actors of The Office have started doing that.
Yes,
and then
Office Ladies, they have the West Wing Weekly. And
yeah.
then you have that's kind of a thing now. Is having the show's stars doing the recap episodes. We've not done any kind of recap episodes. We do favorite episodes and things like that, but we take listener questions and voicemails, and we have a lot of interviews. We've gotten to interview the entire main cast of the show and some of the writers and the producer, some folks who've even passed on since then.
How cool was that for you?
It's the word that I use is surreal.
Yeah.
It is completely surreal to be sitting in my little home office and Zooming with Loretta Swit and Mike Farrell and Alan Alda and and talking to these people who have been such a huge part of my life, and knowing that I'm sitting there and having a conversation with them about my favorite show is bizarre.
And that's a draw, right? That brings people in to listen to it because they want to know how Alan Alda. They want to know how the cast members feel about their favorite show. Like they were on the show. What is their perspective of the thing they created that's loved by so many?
Yeah, that's just it. You want to hear from them, and you also want to hear from people who are behind the scenes. You want to we talk to writers who are on the show, and I'm fascinated by the behind the scenes stuff and the directors and producers and things like that. And as guest star, somebody who was a guest star once on the show, I love talking to them because them being a guest star on that show left a mark, and it had an impact on it. And they don't talk about that in their interviews. So
that's true.
So it's been really, really fun, and it's crazy. We have listeners from all over the world, and we have a pretty loyal fan base. MASH has a very, very loyal fan base, and every day, many members of that fan base are coming on board and saying, "Hey, I just found you for the first time. We've been doing this for almost 4 years, over 4 years now, but I'm just finding you for the first time, and I'm going back and I'm binging all the episodes, and it's fantastic. I love it.
That's so cool,
and it's great. It's a lot of fun, and it's been really eye opening as how much the show impacts people. Yeah,
So can we go back just a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, so I forgot your co-host name already.
Jeff Maxwell.
Jeff Maxwell. So how did you get? Did you just randomly message him?
No, he was on.
How did you already know him?
When I worked in radio, I was on air and worked in creative services for a local radio group here. For 15 years.
Gotcha.
And back in 1998 or 97 or 98, I think it was 97. He wrote a MASH cookbook. And
interesting.
Yeah, it was a great idea.
Was there sarcasm, or was it like a literal you could cook
the recipes are real.
Okay,
the recipes are real.
Well, I know what we're doing for a
and
future
they're good.
cooking segment.
They're good. They're good. They are very good. So
can we have him come in and do a cooking segment on the spiel?
We'll fly him in.
Yeah,
heck yeah,
that would be awesome. Honestly, that would be so cool.
I'd love to do that. I want to get him here at some point.
Oh yeah.
He is a foodie. I mean, he loves food and he loves cooking, and so I'd love to get Jeff here. And so if that ever happens, I'll let you guys know.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But he did a MASH cookbook, and then he was doing radio interviews for that, and we were able to book him on our little morning show.
That's cool.
On the station here, and we just had a good time with him. And I stayed in touch with him on via email for many years. We went out to LA at one point and had lunch with him, and we just stayed in touch. But flash forward, that was like 1997. Flash forward to 2018 is when I had the idea to do this.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to him, and here we are 4 years later.
And so I think it's really cool because I feel like a lot of us, in here, we go and do video events, or we're shooting events or something, and it's we run into cool people, but we don't necessarily always keep up with them, right?
Yeah.
It's we made the contact or something, and then it's just cool that you kept up with them, and then you were then like, hey, I have this crazy idea. You know, what was it, like a decade later?
Yeah, more than
Or
that.
no,
Yeah,
two,
it's two.
two decades later. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
20 years
and
later.
it's turned into like this super cool podcast.
Yes.
And people are loving it and enjoying it. And then that like rifled into you interviewing almost the entire cast or the entire cast,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that's just cool. I mean, that's like a lesson in there, right? It's just to keep up with those people that you've done work with like one time, because you don't know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, you never know. You
Yeah.
never know the connections you make professionally or socially. You never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, never burn bridges. It always matters to stay connected and network with people.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, from like a marketing point of view, how can a podcast help you?
So if you're a business,
Business, yeah.
okay. A podcast. Well, let me preface this by saying that if you are thinking about starting a podcast, it's work. It's a lot of work to do a podcast. There is a commitment. There is a time commitment. Not just actually recording the podcast, but doing all the prep work, and then there's commitment after you record. There's a lot of time. So I do not tell people just flippantly start a podcast, because it's not that easy.
Yeah.
It isn't. That said, a podcast can be a powerful marketing tool. It can help you in your business space. It can help you become an authority. It can help you to cement yourself as an expert. And not necessarily I don't say to go on to a podcast and just talk about how wonderful you are, because nobody wants to listen to you talking about how wonderful you are in the business space that you where you are. Look at me, I'm fantastic. Nobody wants to listen to that guy.
Unless you swing it the right way.
Well, hey, there are podcasts for that too.
Right.
But I hear. But it can be a way to inform, educate, entertain, and educate your prospective buyers. It also, you have to look at it from what is your goal with a podcast? Are you talking to prospective customers, or are you trying to gain stature within your industry? There are two, because those are two different really universes. If you're talking to prospective customers, then you're wanting to talk to them in their language about what matters to them. You want to say, what we do is a business helps you fill in the blank, helps you get smarter, make more money,
solve this problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
What problem are you helping? What are you doing for that prospective customer?
Yeah.
And you can, and one of the ways you can do that is ask your staff, ask your employees, your team, what are the top 5, 10 questions you're getting from customers every day, all the time, the same because you're getting the same questions over and over and over again. Write those questions down. Take one of those questions. That's one podcast episode.
Oh, yeah.
Boom.
Take the second question. That's your next podcast episode. You just talk to them in a way that you would talk to a friend.
Yeah.
And they were asking that question. And so that helps you just kind of be the expert before they even need you.
Yeah.
So if somebody is out there and they're thinking, well, okay, I need a new water heater. Is it good to go just with a traditional water heater, or I've heard about these tankless water heaters? Well, if you're a plumber and you're having a podcast out there talking about the advantages of tankless, or the disadvantages and advantages of a tankless or traditional, somebody might stumble upon that.
Yeah.
And then if it's a regional thing and people are listening to it, you're going to have people in your region who are listening to it. You're also going to have people outside of the region who are listening to it. You're even educating them.
Yeah.
But the people who are close, you're just cementing your role as the authority in that subject, so that when they do need you, they know you already. They know, like, and trust you before they even pick up the phone to need you. So podcasting can do that. Now, if you're just trying to gain stature within the industry, that's where you bring on other people in your industry and have interviews with them,
Right.
and let them be the stars of the podcast, and that will, and then they will share those with their friends and their industry colleagues, and then you get their friends on the show.
Yeah, because you're kind of getting like everybody's audience.
Yes,
and then and that's
absolutely.
coming back to you. Like it kind of trickles back.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes, and so the flip side of that too is you can offer your services. If something like a podcast isn't something that you're really interested in doing yourself, like I don't have time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the knowledge to do all that, but you have the knowledge within your industry that you could reach out to podcasts in your space and say, hey, I'd love to be a guest sometime if you need a guest, because podcast hosts are always looking for guests.
Yeah. For sure.
Always.
Yeah.
And so if you were to go to one and say, hey, if you ever want to talk about this, or this, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. They'll probably take you up on that. And so, if you don't want to start a podcast where you interview others, at least offer your services to do that. Because that will help. That will help to cement you in your space of being that authority, that expert.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think there are some people I follow who they don't have a podcast at all, but I see them pop up on so many other podcasts, and I'm like, what the heck? You might as well have your own.
Yeah.
And eventually they usually do. I think, after they do a few, it's kind of like they get the bug, and so they're like, oh, well, I can do this.
Right.
This isn't as hard. And it the thing about podcasting is anybody can do it. That's the good thing. The bad thing about podcasting is that everybody can do it.
Yeah.
It's everybody and their dog can do a podcast, and just about everybody and their dog have a podcast.
Yeah.
Is that a podcast? Everybody and their dog has a podcast.
I guarantee there's probably
it might be
a guy and his dog probably have a podcast. Yes.
Cool. Rough.
If not, you can start that.
That's a free chicken right there.
But it's true. I mean, it's very easy to start a podcast. It's not easy to continue doing a podcast.
Yeah.
It's kind of. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's kind of like how, like, when YouTube first started taking off, everybody had a YouTube channel,
Yep.
and then everyone's like, "This is a lot of work."
It is,
And
yes.
then-
That's why I don't know the exact number stat, but there are so many podcasts. I think the average number of episodes is like 6 episodes before you go into what's known as pod fade. You just kind of fade off into go into that great big podcast.
You know what's funny is I think we did like 6 episodes, and then we got super busy, and then didn't produce any for like 4 or 5 months or something.
Yeah.
And then now we've, ever since January, February.
I know we've been going really hard.
Yeah,
on
since like
this year.
February, we've released one every single week, and we have not missed a week.
Yeah. And that's another key to it too.
Yeah.
Is if you're going to do it, you have to be consistent. Consistency. The two main. Well, there's really 3 main pieces of a podcast. One is content. Is the content? Is it
like
usable?
relevant?
Is it relevant? Are people going to get anything from your content? The second one is quality, as in audio quality. You can
use your phone.
You can use your phone.
Yeah.
Should you?
Should you? Yeah.
Or should you spend a few $100s and get something better?
You can find a cheap, good USB mic
Yeah.
that
Oh,
you can
yeah.
plug into
Totally.
your laptop or your phone, and it doesn't cost that much, And
Right.
then you can find editing software. You can find free editing software, or you can buy it, and it's pretty easy to do basic editing. But you know what? There's people out there who can do it for you. Talk to people who are in radio or do any kind of audio engineering or audio editing. They could probably use, kick them a few bucks, kick them some gift cards, and let them, they'll do it for you.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I have gotten a phone call and they're like, hey, what should I buy for podcasting gear? And I'll just send them a list. And they're like, oh, thanks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's super easy. Yeah.
It's super easy. If you go in and type in what's the best microphone for Google, you're going to get a million different articles.
It's a never-ending list.
So if you know somebody who is in that audio space, reach out to them because they'll have a recommendation for you.
Yep.
So you have content, you have quality, but then the next one is consistency. And so consistency is how you build the audience. If you show up And this is really, I can think, even more important for if you're a business trying to do marketing through a podcast. Consistency is key because it also is an indicator of how you do business. Are you always showing up? Are you saying you're going to be there and you're there? Are you dependable? Are you reliable? And one of the ways you do that is you say, okay, on every Tuesday, we're going to release an episode. Or the first Monday of the month, we're going to release an episode. Or the 1st and 15th, whatever it is, figure out that schedule and then stick with it. Stay with it. You know, every now and then you can say, hey, we got to take a break, and listeners will understand as long as you come right back.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the consistency, always being out there, people then know it becomes appointment. You know, there are a lot of people who have favorite podcasts, and they know the day that their podcast is released.
Yeah,
Monday
no,
and
there's
Thursday.
yeah, that's to say there's like a handful of podcasts that I listen to.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot more in the past, and there's been a few that like didn't release or something like that for like a couple weeks, and I just completely forgot about them and completely stopped listening to them.
A lot of people are like,
And I didn't even
routine
realize
listeners.
it. Yeah.
Yes, they are. It's appointment listening for some people. So,
Yeah.
it's very important, that consistency, and determining that from the get go is tricky because if you're starting and you don't have a lot of experience with podcasting, you don't necessarily know how much work it's going to go into it. So don't be overzealous and say, I'm going to do a podcast every day, because no, you're not. No, you're not.
Unless
You
your
burn
podcasts are 5 minutes long.
Unless they're 5 minutes long. But, you know, a 5-minute podcast still takes several hours of prep time.
Yeah.
And then you have the time afterwards, post-production.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even a 5-minute podcast can take several hours of work. You know, our podcast runs average about 40 minutes an episode or so, sometimes longer.
Yeah.
Interviews are longer. And, you know, when you factor in all the prep work I do ahead of time, and then the actual recording, and then the editing, which for me takes the most time, I'm putting in 10 to 12 hours an episode, you know.
Yeah.
And so
Dang.
it's a lot, you know, but I also go in and I make sure that it's very polished and very clean, because I'll take an hour-long episode and get it down to 45 minutes because I'm saving the listener 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
being respectful of their time. So, you know, there are a lot of different things that go into a lot of things you have to contemplate and consider when you're starting a podcast. I think it's a great thing to do. I really do. If you have the content, you have the quality, and you can do the consistency, those 3 keys will help you. And honestly, that will help you in all of your marketing. That's not just podcasting.
That's life.
It is. I mean, if that's an exercise plan. That is, I mean, seriously, you know, it's like that's an eating plan. That is, if you're trying to make any kind of improvements, it's that consistency, that quality, and the content. What is it you're consuming?
Right.
And but more so, I mean, I think with podcasting, those are the keys. And a lot of times that's where a lot of people fall short. They sometimes will have maybe 2 of those 3. Maybe 2. Some podcasts just have 1.
Yeah.
But not a lot of podcasts have all 3 of those. And that kind of helps determine which ones survive a little bit longer. The other thing I'd like to mention, and sorry, I'm just rambling at this point,
No, it's okay.
is
You're good.
you know, I worked in radio for many years, and so many times you see people wanting to apply to work in radio. Some young people coming in wanting to apply because they want to be on air and they want to be a radio star and they want to make big money. Well, okay, unless your name was Howard Stern or Rush Limbaugh or something like that, you weren't going to make big money in radio. You're going to make an hourly wage running a soundboard for a high school football game. You know, that's what you're going to be doing, especially starting out. If you're going into podcasting to make money, you are not going to be satisfied because podcasts will not make you will not make a living doing podcasts. It's kind of like writing a book. If you're an author, you don't write the book to make money. You're writing you don't make money off the book. You make the money because of the book. You know, from speaking or, you know, and getting clients and things like that. Excuse me. So if you're doing a podcast just thinking I'm going to go in and start a podcast and start raking in all that money, it doesn't work that way. Now, eventually, you may get to a point where you can interest or attract somebody to advertise, or attract a way like we use Patreon for listeners to support the show. But we didn't introduce that until year 2. I read somewhere that it takes like 18 months or so of consistency before you really start to see an uptick in any kind of downloads or anything like that. And it was right about that time when we finally saw it. And then the growth was went. I mean, it was exponential after that.
Getting people to invest their time is the crux of it.
Yeah.
Because you said after those 18 months, people realize this is a thing that's going to keep going.
Yeah.
So I can sit down, I can catch up, and I can invest my time because it's going to have a payoff at the end.
Yeah. If the content is good, you'll stick around. There have been podcasts I've tried to stay with them. They may have the consistency, but they are not what they're delivering is not doing anything for me.
And some stuff just it doesn't have the same amount of content as others does.
Right.
I mean, all of us right here could probably make a video photography podcast and talk about that. And we could follow the trends and talk about the trends. We could talk about the gear. We could talk about new stuff. There's an unlimited amount. But the more you niche down, the more your content is niched too.
And the lower number of downloads you're going to have. The more niche you get, you're not going to be, you're not $100 bill. Not everybody's going to like you.
Yeah.
And so, you have podcasts like Joe Rogan and these huge podcasts that are getting millions and millions and millions of downloads every day. You're going to be getting like 10.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
That's true.
But if you're doing it as a marketing tool and you have, if you could sit down with 10 people and tell them what you do and why you do it so well and how their life's going to benefit from it. And if you were able to get, 3 of those 10 people,
even one,
doesn't that make it worth it?
Totally.
That's worth it. So,
plus it's content that's going to stay up the entire time. So if somebody stumbles upon it and then works with you because you posted that thing like a year and a half ago,
absolutely,
that's totally worth it.
And another, that's a great point, because what you can do is take a lot of, if you're a business and you're using this podcast to talk about what makes this so great for the customer. Not only is it a good resource on your website to have for prospective customers to come along and go, oh yeah, I want to know more about that. It's also a great onboarding tool for employees.
Yeah.
So your team is hearing it from your words. Here's why this is going to help you.
Yeah.
Mr. Customer, Miss Customer. It's a great tool if you have a new employee coming on board. Hey, here's your training manual.
Yep.
Listen to these, take notes.
Yeah.
And there it is. So it's kind of twofold.
Yeah, we've actually done work with a company. Daniel and I did a shoot for them, and they have an entire podcast, and it's like 10 episodes dedicated to onboarding employees. And
wow.
And it's all about leadership, like how to train them to be leaders before they go out into the field.
Yes.
And it's just like, it's so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's easy. You just record them and then you're done, and then it's the same thing every time. Everybody gets your culture.
Yes.
How you guys envision your business to be.
Yes.
Super cool.
It satiates those 3 things. You have like your content, your consistency, and all that's right there. Everybody gets the same, of lack of better words, sermon. You don't have to worry about replicating it.
Yeah, absolutely. And and that goes back to, who are you talking to? Who is your audience? And you don't want to lecture. You don't want a 30-minute lecture, because nobody is going to listen to that. You still have to have some personality.
I don't know. People listen to a lot of TED Talks.
Well,
that has to be, that's like your audience is like that secret fourth thing, where you need to consider, like, who are you talking to?
Yes, you have to consider who you're talking to, and think, because again, the reason I started Mash Matters is because I wanted to create a podcast that me as a fan would enjoy. So when you're putting together a podcast for your customers, or if you're doing one for fun, for whatever, you have to consider, who am I doing this for, and is this something that if I was a listener that I would take something from? Always have your listener in mind when you're doing these things. Always look at it from their perspective, because everybody has a why should I care meter. You know, I mean, seriously, it's like, what?
Well,
what are you gonna
people
do
are being
for me?
bombarded with a billion things every day.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You know.
What they don't want is a 30-minute advertisement for your business.
Right.
You know, that's not what they want. They just want to know what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Plus, the nice thing about this on Spotify, anyway, you can just like fast forward through them.
Oh yeah,
It's like the first time I was hearing ads, I was like, wait a minute. Why am I listening? I can just fast forward. I was like,
and not that you know, some ads. Look, I make a living writing ads. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that ads don't work. They do. I've bought things from podcast ads. You know, I mean,
100%.
You know,
Yeah.
so they work. And you know, and that's the other thing is maybe you're not interested in doing a podcast, but if there's a regional podcast that you're interested in that is kind of fits your audience, reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to sponsor your podcast.
Yeah.
My goodness, they would probably trip over themselves to do whatever you want to do, because you know, podcasters don't make money, but podcasting costs money. So
Yes.
you know,
it also, like, your podcast can be leveraged in a lot of ways because most people like us, like, they have a video camera up now too.
Yeah.
So you can put it on YouTube. You can like cut the content up into shorter forms,
Yes.
pull out the juicy bits to pull people in.
Yep.
And so if you're willing to travel, hey, you have a really cool location. Like, maybe you want to hit the wine trail. Like, hey, we're going to do a podcast at each venue. The wine trail can pay for it. They can see this. Plus, if people are interested, they can come see the live viewing.
Yeah.
Or, hey, you have a product. Like, we're all like videographers, photographers. You guys have a product you want us to review. We'll use it and everything. You don't have to pay us in the product, but you can, like, we're going to send it back to you, but we can leverage it in that way.
Absolutely.
So they can see it, they can hear about it, and like maybe we could do a two-parter.
Yep.
Hey,
Yeah.
let's look at it. Let's build quality. That was really good, and come back. This is a really fun thing to use in the field. It did its job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you got to keep in mind that as part of your audience is also those advertising companies, and they're going to want to associate with someone that matches their identity, their culture, like
Yes.
what they hold ideally. So, like, for example, if you have a very vulgar podcast, you're probably not going to get a lot of mainstream advertising, like looking for your podcast to be a part of something like that.
Right. But you also may have advertisers that do gravitate towards those types
yeah.
of
Right.
podcasts. So I mean, yeah, it's different. You mentioned repurposing, and that's a big thing, especially from a marketing perspective. Is if you do the video and audio at the same time, then you've got two different ways to present that, because you know. Really, they're about half the population of America. They're more visual learners, and the other half is more they learn by listening.
Yeah.
And so so you're really kind of hitting both of them. But even if you just do one or the other, you can still take snippets of those. You can take snippets of an audio podcast. Like our podcast is just audio. We don't do video. Every now and then we'll do some little videos and fun stuff for YouTube, but we put all of our episodes on YouTube too, just audio.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked at the number of people who listen to us.
Just let it run.
Just listen to us on YouTube. I never would have thought of YouTube
Doesn't make sense.
as a podcast player, but it's there, and we have people who solely listen to it on YouTube.
In this sort of current age of social media, YouTube has sort of transcended past just a video platform to more of a social media.
It's a music player too. I mean,
Yeah.
people just have it on in the background. They keep that on.
Yeah.
But you can take snippets of that. You can take a piece of audio. We use that headliner.app, which is a great little free tool that you can use to just make a graphic with your audio, that up to 10 minutes, I think. And you can put that on your social media. So we will, we'll take little clips of an interview as a teaser and just put it out, like 2 minutes of an interview. And we'll put it out as a teaser for the next episode, and it's just a graphic with the audio attached to it. It's a video, and so you can take that. You can also, if you do video only, you can just pull the audio from it and make that a podcast. If you write articles for your website, if you have a blog on your website that you update with regular articles, take an article, use that as a podcast episode. Discuss the contents of that article. I'm not saying just just print it off and read it, because nobody wants to listen to you read. But if you and somebody in your company, or somebody who just a friend who has some personality, you want to discuss the content of that article, that's a podcast episode. Look for those ways to take what you already have and change it and tweak it and make it into something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have a podcast over something that's very important to a lot of people, they'll want to know what other people feel about it. A lot of people want to have that validation that other people feel the same way as them, like whether it's a sports podcast or something like that. They want to know, do these people like the same teams that I like? Do they see the sport in the same way that I see it? And when you grab those people will be dedicated listeners for the rest of time because they associate this very positive feeling with your podcast.
Yes.
In like feeling like they're part of that family. Some people go so far as being parasocial about it, and you might want to watch out for those people if you start getting emails every day. But you want there to be a connection to your audience in every art form, in every medium. But with podcasting, you have to have opinions probably about certain things, or you're going to be very flat. So you want to try to pull people in because they agree with you on something, or
disagree.
It's true. I mean, I don't think anyone wants hate listeners, but they're still listeners, I guess. But
still counts.
Like for example,
a download is a download.
Yeah.
I like this podcast that's like sort of following esports, like the electronic gaming sports stuff, and there's a couple of people on there that I just want to hear their opinion on how this game went, how the game feels, and so like I'll tune in and listen for that person's point of view, and I'm like, yes, they agree with me, and then that's that serotonin
validation. Yeah.
It's just it's basically speaking to people who are interested in what you're interested in. You're speaking to your tribe.
Yeah.
And it's a relationship deepener. And so if you are honing in on something that there is a segment of the population that believes the same way that you believe, they're going to listen. They're going to, and so that's your audience. That's who you talk to. And everything you do, you're like, okay, what I'm putting out, is this what they want to hear? Or is it not? If not, then you may want to reevaluate it. But, you talk to who the main thing is, before you start a podcast, you have to figure out, who am I talking to? Who am I trying to inform, educate, persuade? Who am I talking to? And then focus that way. Because if you just try to put a podcast out that's everything to everybody, you're going to be nothing to nobody. I mean, it's not going to happen. Yeah. You can't just throw a bunch of stuff to the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
You have to know going in, this is us, this is our position. If you don't like this, if you have no interest in that, it's okay. Yeah. Don't listen to us. But if you are into this, listen to it.
Yeah. Keep coming back for more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's how variety podcasts are so successful, is because, they're tackling a larger demographic, but they have a formula of how they go about it, so that it's like the delivery is the consistent part.
Yes.
Yeah, you're expecting the same people on that podcast to have consistent opinions and consistent takes on stuff, and you want to see how they feel about X thing. Well, you can tune into that episode and figure that out. Same thing goes for more niche podcasts. Like, if one person on the podcast always has, the same feeling about it, and you tune in and you get that response, you know what to expect. So it feels like you're having lunch with the boys, and like they're, you're just shooting it, and it feels like family. It feels like part of your everyday life. Then you become a routine listener, and that's when you get people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up the podcast.
Yeah.
And plus, we've almost went twice as long as we normally do.
It's
totally
fine.
Ramble,
I talk.
It's totally fine. Whenever we have a guest on, it usually goes a lot longer, just because we want to hear your opinion, because we're tired of hearing our own.
Yeah. We get a minute for each podcast. 40th episode, 40 minutes.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. I guess that works. Yeah.
40th podcast special.
But you guys don't look a day over 39. Let me tell you that. Not
All right.
Yeah, Prescott's like 56.
Sorry.
You're out. No, Ryan, where can people find your podcast, the business that you do, anything?
Okay. Yeah. Mash Matters is the podcast. You can find it on pretty much any podcast player. We're online at mashmatters.com. Okay. We also are on YouTube and all the social media. And then as far as my business side, You know, I don't really have Ryan-Patrick.com will take you, eventually that's going to take you to a place where you'll find all the links to the stuff I do.
Cool.
But I'm involved with a group called Wizard of Ads. They're out of Austin, Texas. And so if you go to wizardofads.org, I believe, you can find more information about all the partners, including me.
That's perfect. Well. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Ryan. You're a wealth of knowledge.
Oh, it's been a blast.
For sure. Yeah, so I've learned so much about what we're doing wrong on our podcast.
Yep. Yeah, I had to remember that I'm on the podcast and I have to speak because I did just become a listener for about like 10 minutes there.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so interesting. Wait, I'm on this podcast.
I feel that way sometimes too.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, but no, we seriously appreciate you coming on, taking the time to come hang out with us
I'll come back
for an hour.
maybe.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you guys for watching. You guys can always find the MarketAbilities podcast on Facebook, Instagram, all the listening platforms, YouTube, of course. So go like and subscribe. Go like and subscribe to MASH Matters, even if you don't know what MASH is. Learn.
Yeah, learn something.
That's what the whole
Start
podcast
watching.
is
It's a
for.
pretty good show.
Yeah,
You should
it's a great show.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.